right, welcome everybody back to another podcast episode of After the Tassel. Today we have our special guest, which is Eric Martin from Advanced Technology Services, or ATS. He is a 2005 graduate from Westminster. At the time, it was self-design in communication, which current students might now know as business communications. He's also a MBA. He earned his executive MBA in 2012 from Stanford, their graduate school of business. So welcome, Eric, to our podcast. So we just want to get started here. What have you been doing? Give us an update of what have you been doing after the Tassel since you graduated?
Yeah, no, great question. Glad to be here and thank you for having me. So as you mentioned, I graduated in 2005 and really kind of life just kind of took off. So I'm currently living in Peoria, Illinois, as you mentioned, working for ATS. Today I've got responsibility essentially for our kind of upper Midwest business, essentially from Ohio to the Dakotas. And I take care of our customers in that base, and really enjoy it. A lot of teams, a lot of sites, a lot of locations, and have a lot of fun with the role and with the job. Kind of prior to this though, going back to 2005, I joined ATS in like a leadership rotational program, and it was a two-year program where I did 4 different things kind of every 6 months, and really got a good perspective of the organization, what we did and what we do. And then coming out of that, got into leadership. And I think the foundation, we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, but the foundation of Westminster helped me, and I knew I wanted to be a leader and lead teams of people, so to speak. And so that path kind of took me around the US. It actually took my wife and I over to England for a few years.
That's awesome.
We moved back to the States, and specifically Peoria, Illinois, back in 2015. And then we kind of started our family thing, right? So we have 2 daughters, 2 girls, Emma and Ellie, 5 and 2, a couple dogs, and life is good, right? Life is good. The time has flown by. I will tell you that. Absolutely, the time has flown by. So
yes. So your time over in England, I have to say, I love tea in the mornings. Did you learn how to make a hot pot of tea, like a mean pot of tea?
Yeah. So the thing is, tea and coffee, right? So I never really got into the tea thing. I'm a big coffee guy though, and so I drank coffee all day, every day, morning to night, and that really picked up when we lived over there. That said, my wife, she got into the whole tea time thing. I mean, she joined groups, and they'd have pub lunches and tea times, and it's quite the thing over there. And we brought a lot of that back with us to the States. So yeah, we are experts, I'll say connoisseurs of tea and coffee, but a lot of that came from our experience in the UK for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll get back to that, living in England, living abroad here, but I do want to ask you, what led you to choose Westminster College from the beginning?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think to give some context, I'm from South Central Missouri, right? So I grew up in Rolla, Missouri, and my dad was actually the basketball coach at Missouri S&T. So I was around college campuses, universities, kind of my whole upbringing, and so part of my childhood was gaining perspective, going around, visiting other campuses and schools. And so for Westminster and for what I was looking for, I knew I wanted a small, individualized, I'll say focused education, right? I knew I needed that. Oversight's the wrong word, but I didn't want to go to a large school where I was just a number. I wanted to have meaningful relationships, right? And I had known a lot of folks there in Rolla growing up that had gone to Westminster. Some of the most successful people I knew in town had gone to Westminster. So I always knew the name. And then I was an athlete. I played football and basketball in high school, won an opportunity to play football, continuing on, had gone to a couple of visits at Westminster, and Coach Welty, who's still there, right? He and the assistant coaches at the time did some visits and had an opportunity. So and I guess the last thing, which I feel compelled to say, is for me, I knew I wanted to kind of get away from my hometown, but I didn't want to get away too far, right? And so, Fulton was about 90 minutes from Rolla. So if something happened, I could get home if I needed to, but I was far enough away that hey, I was an independent person. And I think that was something helped me find myself a bit, right? And I think that's important for a young 18, 19-year-old student to say, to figure out who you are in life, because that's part of the college experience.
Exactly. I agree. Yeah, I think Fulton is set up, in the perfect location in Missouri because we're, a little over 2 hours from Kansas City, maybe an hour and a half from St. Louis. And we heavily recruit, as you already know, from the St. Louis area. And it's just, it's just down I-70. So, and, we're an hour away from the lake. If you wanted to go and have some recreation, I think it's just perfectly positioned for all of our students. As far as your experiences while you were here, did you study abroad? Did you have an internship? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, no, great question. I did not study abroad. I did a lot of volunteering through kind of the leadership programs we'd started at that time. I think Dean Humphreys was the name that really got some of the leadership things kicked off. But I did have an internship, and my internship, I would say, for me was pretty impactful, and it actually helped further the foundation that I'd been laid and afforded to at school. And so I interned the summer before my senior year with the Missouri Lottery. The role was essentially a mobile marketer. We traveled around the state of Missouri. We did marketing events, promotional events for the lottery, right? So concerts, grocery stores, gas stations, bars and restaurants, state fairs, right? The state fair or whatever the case was, and we just did these events. And the motto during the internship, the thing that kind of drove us was, you got to be flexible and adaptable, right? We can have the best laid plans, but things are going to go wrong. And so if we've got to be flexible, we have to adapt to those changing situations. And here I am, gosh, what is it, 18 years later, I guess it is. Time is going by on me. But that flexible and adaptable kind of mindset has interwoven throughout my life, right? And again, things don't go as planned. We can have like best laid plans, but they're going to change. And so the more resilient we are and flexible we are, the better off we'll be. And I'd say you get that in athletics, that those things happen in life. But the lottery internship for me gave me that perspective, kind of in a real world setting. When myself and 5 other folks were on the road, it's just us. Hey, you know what? The tent blew over because it's windy today. What are we going to do now, right? And so figuring all those things out on the fly, I think was a great perspective and a learning experience for me, and very fond of those memories and the team we work with. So.
Well, and 15 years later, we're in the midst of COVID, in 2020 that hit. And what great skills to learn for flexibility and adaptability. How did your current workplace at ATS, how did you respond to COVID and being flexible and adaptable?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say for the most part, we followed suit with most organizations, right? We didn't know. So in the early months of the pandemic, you didn't know what information, what was real, what was not. We were all kind of in the same boat. So, initially our corporate offices, we shut down, people work from home. It was the whole, the kind of quarantine thing. If you had a sniffle, right? It was all of that stuff. We really transitioned to the use of technology. And I mean, we were talking before this conversation here, we use Microsoft Teams a lot, right? So this whole virtual world that's, today it seems commonplace. It didn't really exist prior to. Yeah, you may have had a conference call on WebEx, but you're not doing video calls, right? That people didn't have cameras everywhere. Yeah. So for our corporate offices, it was pretty easy. It was for the folks that could work remotely, we did, right? We migrated pretty easily. A lot of our employees, though, work at the customer locations. They work in factories throughout the country. And we had to follow the leads of our customers. And you think about essential workers and how, I'll say, the pandemic affected those folks. Again, unknown, and social distancing and 6 feet and wearing masks, that still exists in some of our locations today, right? Even though I feel like the rest of the world has kind of moved on, if I can say that. There are a lot of locations and places and perspectives that haven't, because of what we do and what the folks do. So for the organization, it was a broad brush. And I think as leaders, our job, our role was to be transparent with communication, share with the workforce what we knew, follow the CDC guidelines as best we could, make recommendations around knowing that everyone's circumstances were different. So again, back to being flexible with people. And that's what we did. And I think a lot of feedback we got from our team members and our customers alike was that they were really proud with how we as an organization handled the pandemic and handled our response to it. And it makes you feel good as you reflect back on that. It's 2 years, but it seems like forever ago. And on the other hand, it's like, it just kind of happened, and you just did it. You just worked through it kind of day by day.
Right. And we're all still here. I mean, if that's the worst thing we're going to go through, in our lives, we're here, we're resilient. What a lesson for all of our students to learn who, have, the last 2-3 years, 2 years, obviously, have just not been normal, whatever normal is. And we're now operating what our new normal is. We're all establishing that.
Yeah, that's right. I think this is one of those things that the younger you are, and I mentioned about my daughters earlier. I have a 5-year-old who's never been to school or preschool without a mask. So for her, it's no big deal. For us, we were worried about it. How is she going to do? She did fine. And I get some didn't. And again, it's individualized, but she's not going to know any different. And I think as we look back on this years from now, the general feel is like, hey, it's something, it had an impact to who we are and how the world is, but it's all okay, right? The resiliency word comes back to mind, right? We got through it. We figured it out.
Yeah. Well, before we get on to one of our questions, how to handle your first year on the job, before we started recording the podcast, we talked about interviewing. And you said you've done a lot of interviewing as far as interviewing candidates, and you did some this morning. What are you looking for when you're interviewing a young candidate or a fresh graduate from college? What kind of communication skills are you looking for? What kind of responses are you looking for from individuals?
Yeah, I think depending on the role and what we're looking for, and I think for this audience, I would say one of the things that Westminster really prepared me on was again, professional mindset, public speaking. I think about speech classes, Keith Argument, to use that name. It had set me apart, right? When I entered the workforce, I felt I had a leg up on my peers, the other people that started around the same time as I did, because I was confident standing in front of a room full of 200 people talking about whatever the topic was. And so to go back to your question, I think when we are interviewing folks, or when I'm interviewing people, can they tell a story, right? Can they articulate the message they want me to hear in a clear, succinct manner, right? Can they tell me and give me the relevant information quickly, to the point, and engaging, right? Engage the conversation. So I think that's key. The other thing that I look at is I'm looking for a well-rounded individual, right? I'm looking for a person that has a lot of perspective given where they are in life, done different things, tried different things, said yes to different things, because that culture, that foundation of who they are, that will translate. Give me the culture every day of the week, every day of the year. We'll train the skills, right? We'll teach people what we want them to know here in the organization. And I think this goes to any organization, but you got to start with that good foundation, that good culture. And that's the key that we look for. That's the key that I look for. So if that all makes sense and that all flowed.
Yeah. Well, as far as advice for our seniors or juniors, who have a whole other year to prepare for their career, what is your advice for students how to handle their first year on the job?
I love this question, and it was one that I actually thought about. I again, going back to my perspective and kind of my experience, for the first year in the role, I'd boil it down to 2 simple words, right? Say yes. Just say yes. When asked about a new assignment, when asked about taking on a new project, or asked to go someplace else, say yes. Don't be afraid to say yes. And the amount of things that you will learn and the perspective you will gain, the relationships you will build, those things will stay with you, and they will be life lessons for you. and you'll set yourself apart. If you're saying yes to these tasks and projects and challenges and others maybe haven't, hey, let's go back and ask that person, right? Let's get Eric. He said yes, he did a great job. Let's go back to him again. And now all of a sudden you've kind of made a name for yourself without even trying, right? So I think if I could boil it down, 2 words: say yes when asked questions, and you'll be amazed at how things end up for you.
I think that's great advice. Say yes. So on kind of the other end of the spectrum, work-life balance, wellness in the workplace, making sure that we're meeting our mental health wellness needs. I think sometimes for students, especially students at Westminster who are very high achieving, high performing, sometimes they struggle with that school work-life balance. What would be your advice to students to how to manage it in your life, maybe as a young professional, and how you've learned to adapt into a mid-career professional that you are now?
Yeah, again, another great question. So full disclosure, to be transparent, I still struggle with work-life balance, right?
Okay.
And I think about lifelong learning, right? One of the things that we talk about at Westminster, being a lifelong learner, everyone's working on something, right? So we see people in a professional setting, and I'm telling you, every person you see in the workplace, they're all working on something with themselves, right? They're all working to try to get better and do something. And so I think about work-life balance, and for me, I think perspective is the best thing that's helped me realize what's priority in life. So we talked earlier about me going to the UK, and that perspective of seeing a world outside of the US, living there, being immersed in the culture, understanding how they view things, and why they view things, and the history and the context, helped me as I came back to the US to say, hey, you know what, the world is a bigger place than what we've got here. And so that was something. Being a father changed my perspective. That 5 years ago, you talk about an awakening moment for you. Being a father, goodness,
Oh, yeah.
that's what's important, right? Like all this other stuff, hey, it'll be here tomorrow. And I think you don't have that when you're young. You don't have that when you're in school. I didn't have it, and I wasn't even the best student, right? But I didn't have a very good balance, and it manifested itself in the workplace, right? I was working a lot of hours a day, a lot of hours a week, and I kind of disconnected from a lot of my friends because work was the most important thing. And it wasn't until again, I'll say, an event happened where it was like, okay, this is important. This is what life is. It's not this other stuff, right? This work stuff, it'll be there. And I think the perspective for me gave me a sense of priority and how to set priority, and ultimately, when it's time to go, right? When it's time to shut the laptop down and go home.
Yeah.
And you kind of figure it out. And I'll go back to the first thing I said. I still work on it. Am I better at it today than before? Absolutely. Am I to where I want to be? No. It's continuous improvement. It's a journey. But I am working on it. And I think that's another foundational thing from Westminster. Just we got to always be working on something, right? We can always do. So
I think with the lifelong learning piece, I wonder if one of your strengths from Gallup Strengths Quest is input or learner, because people who enjoy learning about things and their thirst for knowledge never gets quenched. And I think people like that probably do struggle with that work-life balance because their brain is always processing. It's always wanting to learn more. It's a sponge, and I think maybe perhaps have a hard time shutting their brain off, and they're always wanting to develop stuff.
Yeah, you said that, and the audience can't see me laughing when you said that, because that is one of mine. I'm very inquisitive, right? I want to know more. I'm curious of how things work. Why that? Why did that person do that? How does this thing go together? How do they manufacture that widget, right? So, my brain does not shut off, to your point, and you hit the nail on the head. And I laughed at that when you brought it up, and again, people can't see it, but I wanted to share that I did laugh, because that is one of my passions, if you will, is I'm very inquisitive. So yeah.
And obviously, there's nothing wrong with that, and questioning and wanting to learn how things work. That's my husband to a T. We have a garden shed full of little projects and half done projects, and things I know he'll get to eventually, but yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So as far as being an alumnus and giving back and participating in this podcast, number one, and giving your professional advice to students, what other experiences have led you to want to give back to Westminster and become more engaged as an alum?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, we've talked a lot about perspective, right? And as you gain life experience and you mature and you kind of figure out who you are, you learn to appreciate where you came from, and you learn to appreciate what you had and what life was like. And I go back to my time at Westminster, some of my best friends in the world, right? I either played football with or was in the fraternity with, right? Like these are guys I stay in contact with, and some not as many as others, but you think about those times and those memories and that foundation, it's key. And the further away you get from it, the more you cherish it, if that is the right way to say it. And so I think the travel I've done, living in Oklahoma, living in South Carolina for ATS, moving to the UK, they've all given me different perspectives as I've looked back on Missouri, on Rolla, on Fulton, on Westminster, and I've really come to appreciate what it meant to my life and how that formed and shaped who I am today. And this desire, this drawing to get back and give back, and how can I help, right? And if I can connect with one person, or if one person can ask a question, hey, that's a good thing, right? We've hired quite a few interns from Westminster over the years. I've been a part of those discussions and those panels, and brought folks on, given presentations, talked about it, and for me, that's helped, I'll say, fuel the fire to continue to drive and do more for the college, right? I feel very strongly about the progress the school's made the last several years. I think our leadership team has done a phenomenal job. I'm involved with a lot of those discussions and get some updates from several folks. And I'm proud of Westminster's, bottom line. I'm proud of the impact it's had on me, and I think the impact it'll continue to have on people in the future. So
yeah. And who knows, maybe your daughters will eventually come to Westminster.
They've got some onesies. I mean, well, they had some onesies. They've outgrown them now, but from the bookstore, right? So we'll see. I'm trying. I don't know. No.
That's adorable. I love going in there and seeing those little outfits. I think they're just cool. And we've had a lot of alums and actually current faculty and staff who met their spouse here at Westminster and got married in the chapel. And, I think it's just a really neat circle of life, I guess, experience.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, I think that wraps up our time here for the podcast. We thank you for coming on here and joining us and delivering your messages and just saying yes to experiences, gaining new perspectives. Like you said, you've lived in several different states and lived abroad in England. I'm so jealous of that. England is one of those places I've never visited yet before, but it's on my bucket list. So, but again, thank you for joining us and giving our students all that advice.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you for the time. Thoroughly enjoyed it and really appreciate it, and glad to be a part of it. So thank you again. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right.